What does nutrition have to do with your pelvic floor, or specifically your pelvic floor health? So, when I'm talking about pelvic floor health, I'm talking about supporting your pelvic floor, particularly if you're encountering any urinary incontinence, whether that's stress urinary incontinence, which can be leakage, when there's a sudden change, such as a cough, laugh, sneeze, or a jump, or urinary incontinence where there's an urge involved, where you're having to dash to get to the toilet, or you're worried that you're not going to make it in time. And when women encounter any pelvic floor concerns that may also include prolapse that has been diagnosed or not, maybe they're just feeling that feeling of heaviness or dragging in their pelvis that may be accompanied with discomfort or pain as well. We tend to focus just on the pelvic floor. We focus on, oh, I must do my pelvic floor exercises, or perhaps even just think it's one of those things that happens as women get older. Very, very rarely would someone think about nutrition. What has nutrition got to do with supporting your pelvic floor, both with the natural aging process, but also with changes that can happen in the pelvic floor through pregnancy, through childbirth, and changes that happen in the pelvic floor through menopause as well. So what has nutrition got to do with your pelvic floor? Well, there are key areas that I will talk you through today. And one of my favourite sayings is, when it comes to our overall health and particularly confidence related to our pelvic floor, yes, it's all about the pelvic floor because that tends to be what's on our mind. It can stop us from doing activities, but it's not just about the pelvic floor. So we've got to look at those contributory factors that are all around us in our day-to-day behaviours, including our nutrition. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about that's related to nutrition that has a massive effect on our pelvic floor is constipation. So if you're thinking, what's constipation got to do with nutrition? Please just bear with me. So from a pelvic floor perspective, constipation is kind of its enemy. So when we're constipated, it may be that we're not passing bowel motions very regularly, or maybe we are going regularly, but they're so hard that we're having to really strain to pass those bowel movements. Now, bowel motions. Now, both of those situations create pressure for the pelvic floor. If we are not pooping regularly, and by regularly I don't mean once a week, I'm talking about once every 1 to 3 days, and again that varies for different people, but we want to be going every couple of days really, then quite literally you are carrying crap around with you, and that weight of those motions that you're not able to pass is obviously sitting down onto the pelvic floor, albeit indirectly, but also you'll be feeling bloated and uncomfortable, so you're likely to put yourself into different positions to try and ease that discomfort and feeling of bloatedness, which may contribute to more pressure yet down into the pelvic floor. When it comes to doing your poo, to passing those motions, if you're really straining, then you're really straining down through those pelvic floor muscles as well, which obviously again causes some duress to those tissues. So your nutrition can have a large bearing on the incidence of constipation, on reducing how regularly that happens, but also helping you to deal with that. And that may be through specific foods that you eat, as well as looking at the amount of fibre in your diet. Now, for different people, different types of fibre are more relevant, whether you need soluble or insoluble fibre to support the consistency of your stools, as well as how regularly you pass them. So certainly when it comes to one of the big enemies of the pelvic floor, looking at your nutrition to reduce constipation has a big help factor for your pelvic floor. So the other aspect of nutrition that is really relevant for pelvic floor health is hydration. And in a number of ways, hydration is relevant. It's such an underutilized, underestimated factor of our health. When we look at how much of our overall body composition is made up of water, just not drinking enough has a huge impact, again, on the movement of waste products through our system. So if we're not drinking enough in, that has an impact on the consistency of our stools, and so can also support or increase constipation, depending on whether you're drinking enough or not. But it also has an impact on our decision making, on our energy, on the feeling of our skin, and a number of other factors. So hydration is a massively important aspect of overall nutrition, and that's why I have a whole module just on hydration on my online nutrition course as well. But let's bring it back to the pelvic floor. There may be particular fluids, and this would apply to foods actually as well, that are irritants to either your bladder or your bowel, or potentially both. Now, there are some common irritants. Caffeine is probably the most regularly stated one, but it's important to identify, if there are any irritants, which are the ones that are irritants to you. So look at it on a really bespoke basis. How you would go about this is just through tracking. Now, I say that really kind of easily, but for somebody who's not done tracking before, that may be sort of a little bit of a mystery, a bit of a minefield. But you can literally do it with a very simple notepad, keeping track of what you're drinking, how much of it you're drinking, and when you're drinking it. And alongside that, just having a little tally of any sensations that you're encountering, particularly through your pelvic floor, through that day as well. Through this way, you may be able to identify foods and or drinks that are an irritant to your bladder and or your bowel. And if you think that you've identified a number of irritants, one approach would be to remove all of those irritants or potential irritants, wait and see if your symptoms or the sensations that you're encountering have reduced when you take them all away, and then introduce them back in one at a time. Do it really steadily and gradually. Be really curious and observant as you reintroduce each one, and remember to only do one at a time. And from there, you will start to see whether any of those sensations come back in. And that is probably the best way for you to identify individual irritants for you. Now, does that mean you can never ever have those things again? That's your choice. And I think that's the power of tracking. Whether you are tracking to support your pelvic floor health, or whether you're doing it to help with other aspects of your life as well. This is a tool that I use massively with women in perimenopause and beyond, to help them to reduce the effects of menopause that they may be encountering, including pelvic floor dysfunction, but other things such as brain fog, fatigue, and even hot flashes. So when ladies are encountering incontinence or leakage in particular, it seems most logical thing to cut down on the amount of fluids we're taking in, because we think that if we're drinking less, then there isn't as much to leak. And certainly I know ladies who don't have a drink for some time before they're going to the gym, for example, so that they'll be able to go to the gym without any embarrassing oops moments. Or maybe their first stop when they go to do any form of exercise is the toilet, thinking if I empty my bladder, then those oops moments can't happen. But particularly where ladies are avoiding drinking to try and reduce the incidence of leakage or incontinence, it proves to not work in the way that's intended or planned. Quite simply, if we're not taking enough fluid in, then the urine that's in our bladder is much more concentrated, which means it can start to irritate the bladder and you start to have different sensations again. You may still get that leakage, that discomfort, but you may get an irritable bladder with that as well. Or the tube from the bladder to exit the body, the urethra, may get uncomfortable as well. So drinking less as a way of dealing with leakage, incontinence, isn't a good strategy. And it's why it's really important to understand what fluids are going to work for you, what's going to be the optimal amount of fluids for you to take in, and also recognizing that if you identify the need to drink more during the day, that you change from where you are to how much fluids you want to take in a very gradual, step-by-step process to allow that bladder to adapt over time. Now, it's also interesting to note when it comes to hydration, the particular drinks that women choose do have a relevance to pelvic floor symptoms. And in particular here, carbonated drinks in a number of studies have been shown to increase both stress urinary incontinence, so that situation where you get a bit of leakage on a sudden change, such as a cough, a sneeze, or a jump, but also that overactive bladder sensation as well, where you feel like you have to go for a wee really soon after you've already been, or there's a sensation of urge that you have to go. So again, tracking can be really useful to understand exactly how much you are drinking, and of the drinks that you're having, what are you actually choosing, and of those drinks that you are choosing, are any of those causing irritation into the bladder and through to the pelvic floor as well. So far we've looked at the impact of constipation on the pelvic floor and how our nutrition can really help to alleviate that. There's a tie in there with hydration as well. And we've also looked at the fact that there may be some bladder and bowel irritants within what you're eating and drinking. And also that dehydrating yourself, drinking less than your body needs, is a faulty strategy to reduce leakage. And it may actually cause irritation within the bladder that can lead to other issues. And also that for some people, carbonated drinks can worsen the situation. So the next thing to look at is actually your energy levels. So the energy that we have, to a large extent, is determined by the energy we give our body, what we're choosing to eat, what we're choosing to drink. Why is this relevant to your pelvic floor? Well, if your energy is really low, that's going to affect your posture, your alignment, and certain positions increase the pressure into the torso, particularly the abdomen, and down into the pelvic floor, which can have an impact on the resilience of that pelvic floor and potentially even onto the symptoms you may have around pelvic organ prolapse. What's more, if your energy is really, really low, you are not going to be motivated to take action to support your body and improve what you are feeling. So what we eat and drink has a massive bearing on our energy levels, and that can help us in terms of taking action to deal with any sensations that we're feeling. So the final point I want to talk to you about why nutrition is really relevant to any form of pelvic floor concern, whether there is some true dysfunction there or it's something that you are wary of, and you want to support your body, particularly if you're coming up to a period of change, such as pregnancy, that post-natal period, or menopause and the run-up to it. And this last point is a really big one, and it's that of being overweight. So again, there's lots in the media about the risks of being overweight and obese, but issues relating to the pelvic floor aren't often reported with that. But we know that being overweight is a significant predictor for both stress urinary incontinence, overactive bladder, and also for pelvic organ prolapse as well. So pelvic organ prolapse is when one or more of the organs within the pelvis, so either the bladder, the vagina, the cervix, or even intestine from above, or the rectum from behind, lean into the vagina, causing pressure there. And depending on the degree of prolapse, that may actually bulge outside of the vagina as well. Now, in terms of statistics, if you are overweight, which means that your body mass index or BMI is 25 or more, then you have 2.5 times the risk of pelvic floor dysfunction, including prolapse, compared to somebody who's not overweight. And that goes up further if you're obese. So in technical terms, if your body mass index or BMI is over 30, then you're classed as obese. And the risk there goes up to 2.56 times the risk of pelvic floor dysfunction, including prolapse, compared to not being overweight. Why does this happen? Well, the additional weight on the body is effectively supported by the pelvic floor. Think of your pelvic floor as that supportive hammock in the base of your pelvis that's not only supporting the organs within the pelvis that we've already talked about, but is effectively providing a support mechanism for everything in the torso above it, including the management of pressure, particularly through the abdominal cavity. And if we're carrying extra weight, including around the abdominal area, then that is increasing that pressure within the abdomen and bearing down into the pelvic floor. And over time, that leads to stress on those pelvic floor tissues, both the muscle and the connective tissue, and it causes it to weaken over time. Now, again, from a scientific perspective, there have been a number of studies that show reducing your body weight by between 5 and 10% has a significant improvement on pelvic floor symptoms related to incontinence. So if you're somebody that's overweight, your pelvic floor may not be the driving factor for you taking steps to lose weight. But in terms of quantifying that weight loss, if you are encountering that leakage, that feeling of heaviness or dragging within your pelvic floor, or a bulging or a downward sensation, then knowing that taking steps through your nutrition to help you to lose weight is going to have a positive impact on those sensations. Why is this important? I mean, the thing that I see time and again when I'm working with women is when they're encountering any kind of concern, whether there are actual issues there or just a fear of those issues related to leakage, related to bulging, it steals away their confidence. They are not the woman that they feel they once were. They don't do the activities that either they used to do or would love to do just in case something happens. So it changes how you operate on a day-to-day basis, but how you feel within your body. And that can affect your confidence in work situations, all the way through to your confidence in the bedroom and how you feel in sexual encounters as well. And this is all something that we can support you with. So in terms of being overweight, if you need support to look at weight loss from a different perspective that doesn't necessarily just rely on following one fad diet, but helps you to understand how all of the factors in your day-to-day life are perhaps affecting your behavior around food, but also how the changes you make, including choosing the foods that you eat, choosing the drinks that you choose as well, can have a positive bearing, not just on your overall weight, but on your pelvic floor as well, to help you feel strong and confident in your body right now. So if you would like to know more about my online nutrition program to support you with that, then please get in touch. You can comment below this, or you can send me a message direct as well. So as a quick recap then, does nutrition have any relevance at all when it comes to your pelvic floor? Absolutely, it totally does. So from managing constipation to supporting your body with hydration, getting enough fluids in to support your decision making, your healthy skin, your bowel movements again as well, but also making sure we're not irritating that bladder and supporting our pelvic floor as well, making sure you've got enough energy for your day-to-day, but to be active in your life as well, to support your overall body. And that really does come from the foods that we choose, the amount and what we drink to give us the energy to work through our day. And of course, the impact of being overweight or obese and the direct effect that can have on symptoms of incontinence, and proven from scientific studies showing that losing 5 to 10% of your body weight has a significant improving effect on your pelvic floor symptoms. So I hope you found that useful. If you do have any thoughts or questions, then do get in touch as well. I would love to hear from you. And remember, it's all about your pelvic floor, but it's not just about your pelvic floor. When looking to alleviate any pelvic floor concerns, we need to absolutely look at the connection you have with your pelvic floor, but we need to consider everything else around you as well.